Hi guys, it's Rachel here. I'm very excited to come back with another reading vlog. This one is going to be about Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas. This is technically the second book in the Throne of Glass series, but if you do count the prequel novellas, which is The Assassin's Blade, then this would be the third installment. I decided to start doing reading vlogs documenting my whole experience of reading this series for the very first time. So I did do a reading vlog about Throne of Glass, the first book, and if you're interested in seeing that vlog, that will be linked below. And all of these vlogs are going to be as non-spoilery as possible. I am super excited about this book. I am already on page, let's see, 54. I'm on chapter 7 and I'm enjoying it so far. You know, I'm not that far in, so I don't have a ton of things to say, but I will say it's interesting to see that the relationships between Celaena and Dorian and Chaol are already changing within these first 50 pages. We're kind of seeing that Dorian and Celaena aren't as close as they were in the first book, but Celaena and Chaol are becoming closer. Also, it is really interesting to note that Chaol has given Celaena some really interesting information about events that happened in the prequel novellas. So I'm glad that Sarah J Maas is really addressing those events that happened, because they were really important in Celaena's character development as well as her history and her life. So I will probably update you guys at some point tomorrow, because I don't think I'm gonna be able to read too much more tonight. I'm hoping to read about 50 more pages or so before I go to bed tonight. So yeah, I will talk to you guys later. Hey guys, it is Saturday night and it is time for a reading update. So I am now on page 207, so I have read quite a bit since I last talked to you guys, and I am really enjoying this book. I think I'm enjoying it more than Throne of Glass, but it's also just different than Throne of Glass. I don't really know how else to describe it. And just like with Throne of Glass, I am flying through this. I did not expect to be halfway through this book in just a day and a half or so. And I do plan on reading about 50 to 75 more pages tonight before I go to bed, but I wanted to do my reading update now, and I also had a few things that I wanted to discuss with you guys. You know, Sarah J Maas just loves to play with the readers' hearts, I feel like. Because with Chaol Westfall, he is the captain of the guard, and in Throne of Glass, I really did like him a lot, but I just found him and Celaena to just be really good friends. I really didn't expect them to have any kind of romantic relationship. I really saw her with Prince Dorian, but then in this book their relationships are kind of getting flip-flopped, and she's not as close to Dorian as she was in the first book. Now she's getting into a relationship with Chaol, and I'm finding myself falling in love with him. Yeah, I've underlined so many quotes that he has said to Celaena, and I guess I'll read a couple of quotes that I really liked. So I'm currently on page 89. I think she's going to spy on one of her targets, and so Chaol just tells her to be careful. And she says, but you keep saying be careful and telling me how you worry and insisting you help me with things. And he says, because I do worry. And she's like, well, you shouldn't. I'm just as capable of looking after myself as you are. And then he says, believe me, Celaena, I know you can look after yourself, but I worry because I care. God's help me. I know I shouldn't, but I do. So I will always tell you to be careful, because I will always care what happens. I love that so much. That's kind of the first inkling that we get that Chaol is starting to fall in love with Celaena. So I'm on page 104 at the moment, and there's this scene where Celaena gets herself into trouble basically, and she immediately goes to Chaol for help. And so she says all she'd known was that she had to get someplace safe, and somehow she had wound up exactly where she knew she'd be safest, and that was with Chaol, and I just love that. Something that I've realized when it comes to falling in love with someone or finding that person that you want to be with for the rest of your life is not only do you want to feel loved, but I feel like it's so important to feel completely safe with that person. And so as soon as she said that, I was just like, oh my god, she's falling in love with him too. Oh my god, I love it so much. So yeah, I love Chaol now, and I'm very interested to see like where this relationship goes, where these characters go, how this series expands with each book. Something I also wanted to talk about is I think it's really interesting and cool how Sarah J Maas brings up mature topics. I talked about this a bit in my Throne of Glass reading vlog. But I was talking more in terms of like PTSD, and that's something that Celaena is going through. But in this book, she brings up the topic of courtesans, although that was brought up in The Assassin's Blade, which is the prequel novellas. And what's also interesting is that there's a character in this named Archer Finn, and he is a male courtesan. I don't think I've ever read a book with a male courtesan. That's just never portrayed in literature. I feel like it's always a woman who is a courtesan. So I thought that was really interesting. And, you know, Celaena is an assassin, and I thought it was really cool. This discussion that Celaena and Archer have, because they were basically like childhood friends. Being an assassin and being a courtesan are really so similar because you are kind of at the beck and call of your clients. And so it feels like you don't have any freedom. You don't have any freedom to choose what you do with your time, what you do with your life. And so all that to say, I just think it's really cool that she's brought up these very mature professions of being an assassin, of being a courtesan. That's not something I would typically see in YA. Although, to be honest, I haven't read a lot of fantasy in general, whether that be YA or adult. So I don't really know if that's widespread. But I mean, I know there's a lot of assassins in like YA fantasy and stuff, but I haven't really heard of like courtesans being portrayed, and especially a male courtesan. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, overall, I am absolutely loving this book. I can just tell that Sarah J. Maas's writing style has improved, even though this is the second installment of the series. So I think that's going to be it for now, and I will update you guys later. Hey guys, today is Tuesday. I actually finished Crown of Midnight on Sunday night. I didn't really feel the need to give you guys any more reading updates while I was reading the entire second half of this book, honestly, because any thoughts that I had in my mind had to do with spoilers, so I thought it would just be best if I waited until I finished the book to kind of give you a couple of thoughts and then go into an overall review. Again, this is going to be as spoiler-free as possible. So the first thing I actually wanted to bring up is a quote that I really love. So this is on page 294. And this is Chaol sort of thinking about Celaena. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, he's talking about how Celaena, when she was about 10 years old or so, her parents were murdered and she had to run for her life, and she ended up in a river, and that's kind of where Arobynn discovered her, and then he kind of took her under his wing, and then she became an assassin. Having that all in mind, Chaol is talking about her running from death. So he says to escape death, she'd become death. And I just loved that quote so much. It's such a short sentence, but I just feel like it's so powerful and so interesting when you think about she is escaping these murderers, and then she kind of ends up becoming a murderer, and that's just really weird and interesting and cool at the same time. And then also, before I go into like my final thoughts and review and stuff, I just have to say, right around after the halfway mark when I updated you guys last time, shit went down between like Celaena and Chaol, and it just makes me so sad. I don't want to say like what exactly happened. Yeah, like if you've read these books, you know what I'm talking about. Shit goes down, and it was nuts, honestly. So now onto my review. You know, I really do have a lot of mixed feelings about this book, and what's really comforting is that some other people that I follow kind of had the same sort of feelings. After I finished this book, I actually felt the need to watch a review or a book talk about this book just because I felt so conflicted. So I actually checked out Brittany the Bibliophile's book talk of Crown of Midnight. She actually did an entire book talk series of the entire Throne of Glass series when she was rereading all of the books leading up to the release of Kingdom of Ash. And so it was really interesting listening to her book talk because she brought up some really great points about this book, and her video really helped me understand this book so much more. So I will definitely link that down below. I love her channel, I love her content, but her Throne of Glass videos specifically are like my favorites. So my thing with this book is it's hard for me to review. Honestly, truly, there's no like tangible plot that I could summarize for you, even if I were to include spoilers. A lot happens in this book, but at the same time, like there's no tangible story. I don't know, it's really weird to explain. this book definitely feels like a bridge between two very important plot points, because in Throne of Glass, we're dealing with the competition to become the King's Champion, and that plot line is very important, obviously, to the development of the whole series. And then going into the third book, which is going to be Heir of Fire, we have a very clear plot point that was made clear at the end of Crown of Midnight as to what is going to happen next. But at the end of Throne of Glass, the plot is kind of wrapped up in a neat little bow. There's definitely questions that we have at the end of that book, but there is an end to a very clear plot line in Throne of Glass. So going into Crown of Midnight, I think a lot of readers, myself included, went into it just not knowing what was going to happen. I had no idea what the plot was going to do, even based on like the plot that's given to us in like the inside cover. Like, there's no real, like, I'm kind of skimming it right now, like there's just no tangible summary to kind of grab onto. So yeah, it was very interesting reading this book because I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen, and so that just made my reading experience all the more interesting. And I thought overall this book was paced really, really well. I felt like in Throne of Glass there was a part in the middle of that book where the pacing kind of slowed down a bit and it wasn't as interesting, but in this book, I never felt like we reached any kind of lull necessarily. Things were moving at a very good pace the entire time. Also, the world building was very interesting in this. We're getting more of an idea of how the magic system works or did work in the past, because right now, at this point in time in Crown of Midnight, magic was banished from the land for about 10 years at this point, I think. But we're getting more of an understanding of what the magic system was like, and that's been very interesting. But at the same time, I feel like we didn't get all that much information. I think that Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight are really two books that are the tip of the iceberg for this series and for the world in general, especially because the end of Crown of Midnight definitely leaves you on a cliffhanger that leads you to believe that magic is going to be more of a main plot point or a main aspect of the story going from here. So yeah, all that to say, I'm very much looking forward to Heir of Fire. It's just really hard for me to articulate my thoughts on this book, as you can tell. I also wanted to talk about character development because that is very important in this book. In my opinion, Dorian has the most character development of the three main characters, being Celaena, Chaol, and Dorian. Basically, in this book, Dorian goes through a big change, and I'm not going to say what that is because, again, that is a spoiler, but he goes through kind of a big change, and it's really interesting to see him going through this kind of transition in his life. To me, Celaena is kind of stagnant in this book. And Brittany the Bibliophile made some really good points about Celaena and Chaol's characters, but Celaena's character in this book reminds me a lot of her character in the prequel novellas. And so it's just very weird to see her kind of revert back to that very stubborn and arrogant kind of place. I don't know. I feel like in Throne of Glass, you could see like the growth in her character, and you could see her kind of be humbled by her being in the salt mines of Endovier. You know, like she went through this very traumatic thing in Endovier for like a year, and so through that her character kind of grows. But in this book, I feel like she kind of reverts back to negative aspects of her personality that we saw in the prequel. And so because she's so stubborn, it makes her character very stagnant. She's not very open-minded to what the people around her, namely her friends, are telling her. So yeah, I just wish that we would have seen more character development as far as Celaena goes, being that she is the main character. I want to see character development with her. With Chaol, his character was also kind of weird in this. I felt that he was also kind of stagnant, but in a different way than Celaena is in this book. And so like I mentioned earlier in the vlog, Celaena and Chaol end up kind of falling in love with each other. While I was here for it for the most part, that relationship almost made Chaol less interesting, which was very odd. In Throne of Glass, I really enjoyed his character. I found him to be very dynamic. I loved how like protective he was of Celaena, but I also loved his friendship with Dorian, whereas in this book, like him and Dorian are like hardly together, so like we don't really see that friendship very much. And then with him and Celaena being together in this book, it just did something weird for his character development. and I felt him to be stagnant as well as Celaena. But yeah, the ending was super interesting. There's a really cool battle scene that involves like Celaena, Chaol, and Dorian like going into like this portal into another realm, and that was so cool to see. So yeah, very interesting ending, and like I said earlier, I am really looking forward to the next book in this series, and I did end up giving Crown of Midnight 4 out of 5 stars. And that is going to be it for this reading vlog, you guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you would consider subscribing. Don't forget to push that notification bell button below so that you will be notified every time I upload. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!